Powers welcoming you to Dialogue at EPlusTV 6 and a conversation with Edward Jackson, who was born and raised in this city, but spent over a decade of his life in China. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to
He
be
has
here.
moved back to Jackson, Tennessee with his wife and son, and they are expecting another as we do this program. And so we want to get some personal perspective on that, but also utilize that experience that you had in going there. Now, you go to China in 2005, and you go over there on an annual contract to teach English.
Yes, I went through a program called the Center for Teaching and Learning in China. It's out of Memphis, University of Memphis, actually. And yeah, it was one year, and my mother and father both encouraged me to go. They said, travel, go, see, do.
Okay.
But I don't think they expected me to stay gone for 10 and a half years.
Okay. So, well, did you expect to do that? Or?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I studied Spanish in college. I spent a semester in Mexico at University of Puebla. And after college, I was planning to go into the Peace Corps to South America to do some farming. Long story short, it didn't work out. Okay. A guy in Memphis, a friend of mine who's a lawyer there, called and said, "Do you want to move to China?" And I said, you know, why not?
Why not? Okay.
So yeah, and then.
So when you got there, where did you go? What city were you assigned?
I was in Shenzhen.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Shenzhen.
Okay, it's back in the news just recently.
It's in the news a lot these days, but back in 2005 it was not. I'd never heard of Shenzhen.
Because I've just seen that name.
There was a very large industrial landslide.
That's right.
Yeah,
landslide
that killed a lot of people.
Okay.
So yeah, it was in the news.
So did you stay in that city the whole time you were in China?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so
yes,
you
I
were
did.
there for over a decade. All right. So you do the year there, and I want to find out a little bit about that. But then, did you just kind of re-up year at a time?
I renewed my contract. Actually, the company I was with, they offered me a promotion to be in a managerial position, and I stayed another year. And then they offered me another promotion, so I stayed another year with this company.
So you're 3 years into this, okay?
And this is the same company out of Memphis. Right. And then I worked for a sourcing company out of Hong Kong for a little while. Thought about moving back to Jackson, came back for about a month, and then realized I wanted to go back to China.
Go back to China.
There's
Why?
So much opportunity. Okay. It's just a lot of opportunity. Plus, this was 2008, just when the financial crisis hit. Okay. So the opportunities weren't so abundant here.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in China, still today, there's so many opportunities. It's just unbelievable for.
So what did you look to do then? Did you keep teaching, or did you move into business, or what?
So I got into business. I worked in sourcing, and then I ended up.
Sourcing is what?
Sourcing is where I'm kind of like the middleman. I find the factory, or I find the product for someone in America, Australia. That they want to have something made. I can find what they need. Okay. So kind of like that. And then I went back to teaching for a large company doing business English. Okay. And that's where I met my wife. And my wife and I, we decided to start our own company. And we were working with.
Now you met her. She was in the classes, or
she worked for the company.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So we worked together, and then we got married, and we got a dog. Then we started our own company. Then the next year we had a baby. So things like that.
So was your company doing sourcing? Is that what you were doing?
No, actually we were working with Chinese students, primary, middle, and high school that want to study abroad, English-speaking countries. And actually, even today we have students in South Africa, England, Canada, America, students kind of all over.
Okay, all right. So many things I want to go back and pick up, but to catch up with the story, you've decided to come back to the United States.
Yes.
Okay, why?
Well, living in a city like Shenzhen and
Shenzhen is what size city?
About, my father-in-law told me that right now it's about 20 million people.
All right, I think about it, 20 million people. We have, what, 6 million in the entire state of Tennessee.
And
so it's 20 million people living in what size geography?
Let me tell you, what's amazing is in 1980, this was a fishing village. And the Chinese government said, we're going to make this a big city.
Is it on the coast?
It is on the coast. From my balcony, I see Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, so it's right there. So you're adjacent to that.
Yeah.
So their reason for doing this then was because of Hong Kong?
Absolutely. The proximity of Hong Kong is definitely the reason. And it's also it's kind of between Guangzhou and Hong Kong, which Guangzhou is a huge trading, port for, trading people that want to have things made in China. It all goes through Guangzhou. Well, yeah, so it just made sense to put it there, especially between Hong Kong and Guangzhou.
Okay.
So, yeah, the city has just exploded over the last 35 years, 36 years.
Okay, all right. So a fishing village in 1980.
Yeah.
And they just decree
Yeah.
this is going to be a business center.
They pretty much, and this is the way that the government works. They say, this will happen. Go here. We promise you this will happen here. And it did.
Okay. So you're there then as this thing has started blossoming or booming out there.
Yeah. When I first moved there, the subway had just opened. There was one line that went across, well, not even fully across cities, about, I think, 26, I'm sorry, I can't tell you in miles, you'll have to do the math, 26 kilometers east to west, and about 6.87 kilometers north to south. So you did start thinking in kilometers. I know. I kind of had to. I kind of had to. Yeah.
Well, we were all that way to the transition at one time here, and then we quit, went back to miles, right? Got it going on.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
No, that's all right. No, it's perfectly because I want to pick the story back up of the decision to come
So
here.
it was amazing city to live in when I was single. It was amazing city to live in when Chelsea and I we didn't have children.
Right.
Then we had a son, and that changed everything.
Okay.
And if I could stay there and I could send my son to a Chinese school, which Chinese schools are the best. The public schools are the best.
Okay.
They cannot compare, or the private schools cannot compare to the public schools.
Wow. Okay.
They're so much better.
Okay.
And so my son he's an American and he's a Hong Konger. He's got dual citizenship.
Okay.
So he could not go to a Chinese school. We didn't want to pay the money to send them to a private school.
He could not go to school because he's Hong Kong, or
yes, because he's not a Chinese national.
Okay.
So yes.
Let me understand this then. So if you're born in Hong Kong, then even though it's part of China, you're not part of China.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's really complicated.
So it's got its own still separate place.
And this is actually a recent rule or maybe law that if you're born in Hong Kong, you cannot go to public schools in China. I would say it's about 3 years old.
The reason for that?
I think just the overflow of the schools are just packed. Just
so it's
slam packed.
So the priority goes to the people that are Chinese.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Interesting stuff.
So having a son changed everything. And do I really want to raise my son in a city of 20 million people?
Okay.
And I really don't. That's not how I was raised. My wife was born there, but the city wasn't like
that.
So
why back to Jackson? I mean, 20 million is one thing, but you could be in New York, which would look like a small town.
That was about half the size.
Yeah, or California.
Jackson is my home.
Okay. So is your wife okay with that?
My wife, as soon as we came to Jackson, the first time we were just dating then. This was about 5-6 years ago. She came to Jackson, and she was just like, "When are we moving here?"
Is that right?
Yeah, and somebody asked her the other day, they said, "So Chelsea, do you miss China?" And she was like, "No."
Is that right?
So she loves it here. Okay. She's very happy here.
Edward Jackson is with us. He spent over a decade in China, has a son born there or born in Hong Kong. I guess you have to clarify that, right? Born in Hong Kong, right? And so we're going to continue this conversation and try to draw from that unique life experience as we continue this dialogue here at EPlusTV 6. Welcome back to Dialogue at EPlusTV 6 as we continue a conversation with Edward Jackson, who was born and raised in this city but spent over a decade of his life in China. He has moved back to the United States with his wife and son, and another son, as we do this program, is on the way. You may see this program after the next son is born, and so we hope things continue to go well there. All right. There's so many things I want to ask you about this, because part of this, you didn't intend to stay there. You did. You meet someone and everything else. First, about her family. What does your wife's family do?
Well, they're her mother and father. She's part of the one-child policy generation.
Which has been changed now to 2?
Yeah,
is that right?
starting, I believe, January 1st of this year, you can now have 2 children.
One thing that I read about that, and I wonder about this, is that when you have one child, and just by dictate, but families take care of families within that culture, right? And if you outlive your child, there's no one
to
take care of you.
And it's absolutely, and it's also put tremendous pressure on the Chinese children to take care of their parents when they're, one child. They don't have brothers and sisters that can help them.
So you carry the entire load of the family.
Exactly.
Were there more male children born as a result of this, if you have a choice?
Absolutely.
So it's a disproportion in the
it's really sad. They do not want female children. The male child can, grow up and make more money and take better care of the family. And boys are just preferred.
Okay, wow. Tough thing. So her parents are out of the one-child situation. So what kind of work do they do?
They were in international trade. They live, actually Chelsea, my wife, but spent her summers in Thailand. Her parents worked in Thailand, between Thailand and Shenzhen, or China. And so they did international trade. Now they're both retired. And
so they made a good living on all of this with the Shenzhen thing.
They came to Shenzhen, I believe, in '79.
All right, so what is this mix then between a controlled situation where China can just go, okay, this is going to be the city, okay, and you route people there and you route resources there and everything else, so there's control of this, but then obviously there's movement, free enterprise or enterprise, entrepreneurship to a certain extent, so.
Yes, they encourage, entrepreneurship. They encourage it, but it's still very much controlled by the government. The government has control over
So how
everything.
do you get money to do that? If you have a project you want to do or an idea or something, what is you have to ask permission or get?
Yeah, it's for me, if I wanted to start a company in China, and I don't want a Chinese partner, it would be next to impossible.
They just even though you've lived there for a decade, it would be like
Even if I speak the language, I can read the contracts, I can do everything.
So being married to Chelsea helped that in the sense.
Absolutely, of course, you have to have a Chinese partner.
Was there any resistance to you leaving? I mean, if you got freedom of movement, when you say, okay, we're going to move to the United States, does anybody go, maybe not?
Actually, it was pretty simple. I was surprised at how easy it was. Yeah, we just kind of decided. And
what is it like living then in a situation where, I guess, because we're reading out of government arrest of some entrepreneurs or whatever, on allegations of irregularities or theft or whatever, but you have that feeling that if somebody wants to get you picked up, you can be picked up.
You really have to mind your P's and Q's over there. And I've had friends who have I can't speak for what happens inside their business or whatever, but I've had friends who've been arrested on suspicion. I don't think anyone I know has ever been charged, but I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. It has happened. It's scary, actually. It's kind of scary just because the government does have that control, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Except be able to just prove you're innocent, I guess.
You hope, or that you're given a chance to, or whatever. Can they just arbitrarily take your money, your wealth, or whatever?
I don't think so, but it's entirely possible. The banks, if you have your money in mainland China, the banks are all owned by the government. There are no public banks.
So when you're living, you're in your city of 20 million people. You've got a business, you start a business, you're doing it. Day-to-day life, pretty much as it is anywhere?
Sure. I was.
I mean, even though there's a control there, it's...
Sure, I would wake up, I would go to work, I would work all day, go home, be with my family. It's pretty normal like that.
All right. Well, because there's a lot of talk about China. All right, so when you first get there, and you go back a decade, and I heard someone one time that had been in mission work and said, when you go to a place, take your photos in the first 2 weeks, because after that you get used to cows being in the street, and the mission committee comes and they go, oh my goodness, there are cows in the street, and you go, yeah, so what? Right? So when you get there, what are the things that you noticed about that society or that place or that city?
It's changed so much.
Even in the 10 years?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right? When I first went there and I saw another, I say foreigner, but usually a Caucasian. And if I didn't know who they were, we had one mutual friend. I could be like,
Okay.
hey, Steve, do you know Tom? He'd be like,
Okay.
yeah, sure, I know Tom.
Okay.
Like that.
So it was a small community.
Yeah, the expat community was very small.
Okay.
Now it's huge. The people come and go, usually for business, for 6 months, maybe a year, and it's just the come and go now. And I would say, definitely over 100,000 expats in Shenzhen.
Okay.
So it's blown up like that. When I first got there, Chinese kids, they would point and say Laowai, or they would come up, which means foreigner.
Okay.
And they would say hello, and then run away. You know, just because they would see a white person, they just were not used to it.
Okay.
And now it's just kind of common that people don't really acknowledge. Sometimes you'll have small children who will point and say, "Mama, Mama."
Right. Okay.
You know, and but nothing like that anymore.
So, at least in that city, there's much more growing interaction and water. How typical is that? Well, there's no typical China, right? There's like, you know, I think about the United States. Someone said, well, if you were going to show somebody the United States, what would you show them? And I said, well, it could be anything from a strip club in New York or a live sex club to a Mennonite farm, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's all America, right? And so I guess in a sense, but I guess I want to get a feel for, is that kind of change happening all across China?
It is, but on much different scales. Shenzhen is, just exploded.
All right. So it's considered a commerce center, proximity to Hong Kong. So it's going to be more open than some other places.
Absolutely. One of my best friends from Mississippi State went to China and part of the Peace Corps to teach English. And she lived in the poorest province in China. It's called Guizhou. And I went and visited her several times, and it was amazing, just the difference between the city where I lived and where she lived. And it was a village of 3 million people. But we would go hiking just because you could get out of the village quite easy and be, in the mountains and the farms. And we saw this old farmer. And he was pulling an ox or something, and we saw him, and he stopped, and I don't think he'd ever seen white people before. Okay. And he came up to me, and he grabbed my arm, and it was weird, but I was just like, okay, let's we'll see what happens, and he starts stroking the hair on my arm. I don't know if you know, Chinese people are not very hairy on their arms, legs. So he was just fascinated with arm hair. He'd never seen that before. And so it was very strange, but it was, kind of amazing.
How many people in China? It's over 1 billion.
So yeah, I've heard around 1.4 billion at the moment.
So we got 300 million, so we don't have any comprehension of what that society is like.
It was funny, my wife, when we first came to Tennessee, this was back several years ago, and we were in downtown Nashville on Broadway. And I was like, honey, this is Broadway, this is downtown Nashville. And she goes, where are all the people? I said, this is it.
This is it. There are way more here than we need.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was really funny.
So just that whole compression then, what you feel in that kind of stuff. So you say when it's a village, it could be 3 million people.
Yeah, exactly. And in Shenzhen, if you want to escape people, it's almost impossible. There's
mode of
really
transportation, people walk, ride, drive.
All the above. We had
mass transit.
we had a car, and we drive our car maybe once a month. Uber, taxi, subway, great bus system, walking.
And all
bikes.
all within the last 30 years.
Yeah. The subway is within the last 10 years, and it's really nice, super clean, really nice. And now they have, I think, 12 to 15 different lines, where when I first got there was one line. Okay, wow. So
Edward Jackson is with us. He has moved back to Jackson, Tennessee with his family, and he spent over a decade in China. We'll continue this conversation. This is Dialogue at EPlusTV 6. Welcome back to Dialogue at EPlusTV 6 and a conversation with Edward Jackson. He is back at Jackson, Tennessee. He was born and raised in this city. He spent over a decade of his life in China, one city,
Yep,
For Shenzhen for over slightly over a decade, and has moved back to the city. So we're kind of to draw from that experience. China's talked about a lot here, and it goes back. I mean, I remember old enough to remember when Richard Nixon went to what was in essence a foreign entity that we just didn't have any dealings or recognition of these people. You know, from China to us was.
I think he was
Taiwan.
one of the first to really break open West, into China.
So there was this hostile foreign communist entity, with Chairman Mao and all this other stuff. Okay. Now, it's Donald Trump talks about China and they steal from us and they do all this other stuff. So but we're interconnected.
Absolutely.
And so what happens there affects our market. We watch what happens in Shanghai as much as we watch what happens on Wall Street. And so it's all interconnected out here. So what do you tell people about that place? What do people ask you about?
I get questions. I get every question in the book, I believe, from, what do you eat, where do you live, to, what do you see daily, things like that. And
well, how different is it? Now, you talk about the compression, I mean, just the amount of people, just the mass of people that will be in 20 million people in a city.
Yeah.
3 million in a village. A village of 3 million. Village is Milledgeville. Right, okay.
So I guess around Christmas in Jackson, we have the worst traffic of the year.
Right.
And it's like that times 10 every single day, 2 times a day in Shenzhen.
How does that affect people's lives then?
You have to wake up earlier if you want to travel during rush hour. That it's.
You told me one time that it's like standing in line was something that people had to be taught, right?
Yes,
when the Olympics came, it was like you have to stand. You can't just. You can't fight for the meager resources.
So one thing in China is they are very good at putting on a front, and a lot of things are just a facade.
Okay.
And when the Olympics came, they did it perfectly. Yeah, they taught people how to stand in line. Right. On the 11th of every month, I guess because it looks like 2 people standing in line, building up to the Olympics. On the 11th of every month, they had Stand in Line Day. And they made, the businesses, they made sure people stood in line to try to teach them to stand in line.
You don't just converge on a door or rush for an opening.
All that's gone. That's gone. Okay. If you go to a McDonald's,
so they did it for the Olympics.
Yeah, they did it for the Olympics.
And then once everybody left, it's like it's back to normal.
Yep, back to normal.
So that comes out of what? The competition for available resources or whatever, that you got to fight for what you got, or?
I don't think so. I think it's just something that they don't think about. They're not very polite to each other.
Okay.
They're very I like to say they have kind of like a halo around their head.
Okay.
Of about 2 feet.
Okay.
Anything outside of that, they don't care about. That's not their business. Okay. And I've seen people on the street, on the subway, getting pickpocketed, and I'll look around, there'll be about 6 people watching it happen. And I said something. I said, "Hey, Xiaotou," which means thief, pickpocket. Yeah. And then the thief is like, "Oh," and runs away. And all the people around me, they go, "Hero." And I said, No. Okay. I'm just doing what everyone should be doing, is stopping an elderly couple from getting pickpocketed by a teen.
So the assumption there is that's just not my concern.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not my business. I can't get involved. I don't want to get involved. It's not me.
Well, what's the effect on society as a whole then from that?
Well,
how do you produce? I mean, because it's a collective society in a sense.
Yeah. And they take care of their own. They take care of their family.
Family, okay.
They take care of their family, but I think outside of that, they just kind of, it's so competitive there. Everything from school to business that, they have to just focus and try to take care of themselves.
What has living there then done for you?
It's definitely made me kind of, it's so different than the South, just from everyday working with people from all over the world, not just Chinese people, but people from all over the world. My colleagues were from, I would say, at least 20, maybe 30 different countries over the years. Okay. And it just really opens my eyes to, how people think, because in the South, a lot of people, and I honestly believe this, a lot of people have the same mentality, and they were born and raised here, and they think very similar thoughts, where not everybody in the world does.
Okay.
You know, so it's really made me think a lot about just different cultures and how people think.
When you see the United States because like I said, we think it's the country, right? You get out in the world, you know, Thomas Varghese is on our staff here, and he reminds us every once in a while that this is a country.
Yeah.
Okay, right, you know, because we think it's the country, right? And in many ways, economically, in many ways it is, but then also, if you're born somewhere else, it's just a country, right?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, and especially Chinese people, realize that America is still the most powerful, or they like to say, well, it's just a little bit below China. So,
right.
you know, but they know that it's because of America that China's become so powerful.
All right, so what do you think this experience then does for you now for the rest of your life? I mean, you don't contemplate going back, I take it.
Yeah, I don't plan. I definitely will go back for work, you know, and I want to.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay. I want to go back, not to live,
okay.
especially with children now. But yeah, I mean, I had 10 and a half years there. I loved it. It was the greatest decade of my life. I came back with some good souvenirs, my wife and son and a dog. So.
I guess antique over there would be a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is 3,000 years old, right? Okay. So you draw from that then. What do you want your son to know then, or your sons?
Well, I want them to, you know, just...
Because they are Chinese?
Yeah,
right?
they're American and they're Hong Kongers.
Yeah.
Well, I assume Edward, my next son, he'll be a Hong Konger as well. But yeah, I want them to just, you know, to have tolerance for all religions, all races, all, you know, everything like that, because it's a big world out there.
So it has expanded you in that sense.
Absolutely.
In a way that you could not have. All right.
But at the heart, I'm still from Jackson. I'm still from the South.
We're still from the South.
You know,
Well, if your son is named Stonewall, right?
Yes.
Okay, that says it all, right? Okay, so so Stone carries that. When political people say that they steal from us, they are an enemy, an adversary, what do you say?
Well, I definitely feel that the cyber crimes, China's behind that.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
As far as stealing jobs and all, I mean, the people who, I was in a store the other day and a guy came in, he said, China's taking my job, and he had no idea.
Right.
He just came in the store blasting, and so he had no idea that I lived there or anything like that. And I was just thinking, you know, China didn't steal your job. Your bosses, their bosses, the executives for your company made a decision to move there because...
Then maybe we need to change our tax policies or other things. So
exactly.
It's that continued dance. Okay. So all in all for you, a life changer and a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was great 10 years. I cannot wait to go back and visit.
Okay. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate your friendship
Thank
and glad your family is here. Thanks to Edward Jackson for being with us, and thanks to you for being with us and spending this time. Stay with us here at EPlusTV 6, because this is the place where the dialogue continues.